Good morning, everyone. Good to be with all of you. Perfect. Yesterday, I was here for part of this really wonderful program, this Beyond Mind Symposium that many were involved in it, but Lakshmi and Sai Ganesh really pulled together. It was just a stellar program, and everyone still has the opportunity to get in on it because it's part of, it'll be up on this new network that we're using, Mighty Network, where you will have access to it for the rest of your life. But nonetheless, it was great. Think about seeing it if you care to. But as I was here, and I knew I was giving Sunday service twice when somebody asked me what the talk was today, and I answered, and twice people said to me, "Oh, you've given that talk before." It was an interesting comment because I think I've given every talk before. So I asked myself, what was it that had anybody thinking like that they remembered that I had given this talk? So I did something that was very, very unusual for me. And I went home and I watched the talk. And it was, I think about 6 years ago, now I forget the year, 6 or 7 years ago that I last gave this service, I think that. But I told a story in that talk that I'm going to tell again. I didn't really remember it, so I hope those of you who heard it will remember it and know all the punchlines. But of course, there are new people here too. Right before that talk, we had a guest here whose name was Patraji. He was, I guess, a pretty well-known teacher from India. He came to us through a friend of Ananda, whose name is Kartikeyan. He was a very dear friend, Kartikeyan, of Swami Kriyananda's. In fact, Swamiji said he felt like they were brothers. So Kartikeyan wrote a note to Jyotish, and Jyotish answered him and said, "Shanti will be happy to host this Patraji in Palo Alto." That's how I first heard of it. So of course, I was happy to host him. I wasn't hosting him, we all did. But Jyotish was just asking me if I could help make that happen. And so we did. And it was a very interesting gathering. It became very clear that he had a fairly large entourage of people that traveled with him. And they were deeply devoted to him. I had to be in contact with them many times because there were issues about where he would sit, how he would be mic'd, what food there would be served. They were really taking care of him. And the whole experience, the whole scene was very Indian, which we are actually not. Master came and he brought these teachings and he helped us practice them in a very Western bhav, or vibration, I would say. Well, this man was right from India. Almost all of his devotees were Indian. And it was just Indian. I mean, the way they walked in, the way they protected him. So we behaved in kind. We had a chair, we had flowers all around him, very much like what might happen were a great teacher to come in India. And he was very powerful. You could feel it from the minute he walked in. A lot of power about this man. But he didn't otherwise feel much like us. He was a deep meditator, that's what he taught, and he was a flautist. He didn't bring his flute, but he was just nothing sort of, I don't know how to say it, but it was somewhere else other than how we live and practice. For instance, he said to me, if my students fall asleep or don't do what I'm asking during meditation, I hit them on the head with my flute. That's what he said. Now to us, that would be like abusive. To his devotees, that could be darshan. And he just talked to us in a very different way. He said, I don't think you ought to sit up straight when you meditate. I think you ought to lean back. I don't remember all of what he said. I only remember what I said in my talk. But you can hear it was very different. But there was a lot of power, and everybody listened to him throughout the whole talk. He spoke outside at our community. And then afterwards, people would come up and ask him questions. And I stayed with him. So I could really feel the way that he was answering each person. He was speaking to their soul. It was like a different language, but he was speaking to their soul. And there was a really actually good friend of mine who likes to do kind of mental debate. And he kept asking Patraji a certain question, and Patraji just wouldn't answer him. He just wouldn't answer him. It was just like saying to him, I'm not going into this ahead place with you. So he was just right there with everybody. When he went to leave that night, he came over to me first, and he just stared in my eyes. And this was so surprising to me. And then he leaned down and he touched my feet. And I said, what? I mean, I just couldn't imagine what to do with that. But later, when I tried to touch his feet, he touched my feet again. It was like he was saying, God is in everyone. Truth is everywhere. I didn't know how anybody felt about him, but the next day we had this a weekly meeting that we have, and there were like 15 to 20 people in the room. And the whole time of the meeting, we usually talk about different things. All we did was talk about Patraji. Each person, in their own way, everybody had been touched by that man. It was deep. The lessons that they were saying, what they were sharing was deep. And that friend of mine who likes debate really said he would not let me go there. And somehow, without that, I felt my heart expanding near him. So for 1 hour, we talked about this man, and everybody loved him. And the energy in the room was so uplifted and expansive, and really hearts were wide open from a teacher that we, as I said, I wish I knew a really good translation for the word bhav, but I hope you understand. This whole vibration felt different than the way we've been taught on this path, and yet he was living in truth. And that truth was so clear to each and every one of us without words that it was uplifting and transforming. And this reading speaks so much to that. Truth is one. Truth is eternal, no matter where it comes from or who it comes from. When you are in its presence, and if you will acknowledge it, it too can transform you, even though it's not your path. Truth is truth, and we all meet in the same place at the very heart of spirit when we can be there. Early in the year of 2020, actually it was 2020, feels so much longer ago than that, a group of us went to Israel. And on this path, if we go to Israel, we would mostly be going to follow the life of Jesus. And of course, we did. And that's what Israel means to many, many pilgrims. because I'm Jewish and it still vibrationally is with me, I so wanted the group to have an experience of Judaism that they could relate to. So I asked our guide if he could create an experience for us in the town of Safat with one of the Kabbalists. These are mystical Jews who study the Kabbalah. And I knew that it would be able to touch all of the pilgrims. Well, there was an emergency in my life, and I left before we got to Tzfat. But at the end of the pilgrimage, it was very clear that one of the deeper experiences that everybody who was there had, those people who were with the pilgrimage are shaking their head yes, was in Tzfat with a man whose name is Avraham, who studies the Kabbalah, which informs his art, and that's what he does. It is an artist's town as well, but it's mostly filled with people who live by the Kabbalah, which is the mystical side of Judaism. And everybody, to the person, came back and was saying, those are our teachings. They were exactly our teachings with, I would say, joyful surprise, because they could so easily connect with this man. He was a dear soul. We later had him come and speak to us through this class that we created called Church of All Religions. And we had teachers come. Avraham came to talk about Judaism and the Kabbalah, and we had a Sufi teacher come, and Nayaswami Jyotish spoke about Christianity. We covered about 5 major religions. But the point is that truth is not owned by a person or by any one teacher or by any one religion. Truth is real, it has to be perceived, it cannot be studied or worked on, but when it's there, it comes to us and it touches us. And Master was saying here, why not recognize it everywhere you can? In fact, this was his mission when he came here. He came with a whole new message that people had not heard before, which is God and truth is within each and every one of us. And he helped us away from feeling that any one path is the right path. And we all know that, millions of people have died over this argument, with religions feeling that is the way to be. People have been doomed to hell because they believe something different than what other people believe. And Master came and he said, none of that is true. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. He's saying, go deep, find truth, and also realize that it is what's spoken through any true teacher. I forget what this is called. It's at the beginning of this reading, but on that page where Swamiji wrote about this story with Gyandev, it's a beautiful story. And of course, this lesson is deep. But the first 2 lines of that, which he did not include in this reading, are that Swamiji opened his whole book, The New Path, where he was sharing the essence of Master's teachings, which are, of course, self-realization. He said, to all sincere seekers, whatever your chosen path. That's so remarkable to me that he wrote a book filled with the spiritual teachings of this path, knowing that anybody could read that book, and if they were a sincere seeker, they would find truth there, very much like we study Patanjali, where we know Patanjali said, any sincere seeker. It's the same thing for those who want to know God. You will have to go through certain steps. Doesn't matter what your religion is. Doesn't matter what your path is. What matters is that you're seeking truth, and there is a way to truth for everyone. And again, it's not about religion. That's why some great saint said, it's a privilege to be born into a religion, but it's better if you don't die in it. In other words, don't get caught in the dogmatism of any of the religions. Listen to the dogma, the truth, and then live according to that. And it's the great gift that Master came with, and it's the great gift that Swamiji could again and again and again summarize what the path is to get there. And then the second part of this reading, which is so remarkably tied in from the Gita, where Krishna says to Arjuna, you have to find your own path and walk it. In fact, he says very dramatically, better to die trying to live by your own dharma, to find it and live by it, than to be successful at anybody else's dharma. It's interesting, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, imitation is suicide. He knew that. And Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. And he said, this above all, to thine own self be true. And it must follow as night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. So these great writers, these great souls who were tuned into truth they knew in their deep within themselves what Krishna is saying to Arjuna, because other people's dharma can lead us if we try and live the way other people think we should live, if we try and imitate, if we think another path is better, for all of the ways that we can get drawn in. Oh, I'll make more money that way, I'll have more fame that way, that looks easier. Wow, my life's been hard, let me try that life. Looks like they're having an easy time. But interestingly, all that does when it's not ours is open us to delusion, which will lead us to desire, wanting more money, more fame. These are just examples. But if we're true to ourselves, if we listen, just like this affirmation today, and I don't have the words right now, I hadn't read it before now, but what Swamiji said in there is, I will go deep and I will find my truth, and I won't be affected by what other people are thinking. He actually wrote his song, I forget now whether it's Walk Like a Man or Go On Alone, it's been called both things, but it's a very powerful song that we often sing here. And he said he wrote it at a time where other people were trying to tell him what his path should be. And that song came to him. I don't have the words to the song either, and we're not going to sing it right now. But basically, no matter what happens, when you can find the truth, when you can tune in and know what it is you're supposed to do for your spiritual growth, because really in the end, that's what Dharma is. Each of our Dharma is that which takes us closer to truth, and truth is God. That's where we're all headed. So we have to pay attention. We have to deepen our attunement to the Guru. We have to sharpen our own intuition so that we know. I recently had I got together with some friends, and they were talking with me about a lot of different things that are going on in their life. But one of the things that was happening is that they felt that they were being called to not get off of this path, but to take a little detour. And the detour, as we were talking, was feeling bigger and bigger and bigger to me, till I felt myself wanting to pull them back to center. And at first, I started calling them on it. That's what I would say, how I was seeing it. I said, I don't know, this doesn't feel vibrationally like this path right now, yet you keep telling me you're on this path. And then, as I was speaking, I remembered that in 1979, I was, you all know this, but I was brought up here by Master. I was plunked down in Palo Alto, and lo and behold, right within months, and I think part of the community might have already been here, but the Ananda Palo Alto community's roots were just being laid down here. And very quickly, I was able to become part of that in a very real and deep way. It was my path. I didn't know that exactly until I was delivered here. But very quickly after that, I realized Master had come. He had just taken me, put me where he wanted me to be, and I knew that was my teacher. And I was very involved with Ananda for a number of years until 1984, when I was introduced to a man whose name was Sankeshwar Das. The whole story isn't important, but I felt called to go with him. And I did for many years. I didn't leave Ananda or Master or Swamiji or my friends in my heart, but I went with Sankeshwar Das, very different path, very, very Indian. It's how I recognize Patraji. I spent a lot of time in India with him, and the whole bhav of that was Indian, very bhakti though. It's like I was being held in a very great teacher's heart. I obviously needed that. Some years later, 2001, I come back to Ananda, move right into the community. That's where I've been for 20 years, and I'm who I am with Ananda. It's my family, it's my life. My teachers are here, my friends are here. There's really not much in my life besides my spiritual path. And yet, this was all happening in a moment. I had taken a rather large detour that I bet most people didn't understand, because I didn't understand it. I really didn't. I just knew it was true. I needed to go. There was a lot of, I would say people trying to love me well and convince me that maybe I should look again. I was going to be falling off a path. Quite the contrary. I went much deeper, and yet I had to go on alone. I had to find that within myself, live true to that. When I came back in 2001, of course there was a question about it. Are you confused? Do you really know who your teacher is? I never felt a moment of confusion. I knew exactly who my teachers were, and that was it. It was just like the best slide into home plate. I mean, it just worked. So as that story went, I looked at these friends of mine and I said to them, stay as clear as you can. If you feel you're being called, I can't say to you, don't go. Why would I? You have to dive deep, find the truth, and make sure that it's your path. There's a story that Anandi told. This is years ago now, but I've gone back and I've listened to it many times, of a woman who, I don't know if the woman lives at the village or not, but she had, at this time, this is now years ago, several young children. She felt like she could never get it right to be on the path as she felt she was supposed to be on the path. Just couldn't quite do it. She never quite made it to all of the events she wanted to go to. She wasn't finding a way to meditate. Life just kept pulling her away from her image of what she thought she was supposed to do. And when Swami Kriyananda died, she didn't make it to the service that they had for him. She thought she would go home and watch it, but she never made it to that. And then she was speaking to Anandi, and she was distressed. And she was saying, am I not a good devotee? I'm not doing it the way it's supposed to look like. And Anandi knew this woman, and she said, you know, you often go home, pray, and you open a book and you find your answer. And that's what this woman did. And I'm going to read to you in a moment. I don't know where this is from. I wrote it down. This is the second time I've written it down from Anandi's talk, because it's deep. Now remember, all of this, my detour, my friend's detour, all of what we're talking about sincere spiritual seekers. We're talking about people who live by those spiritual truths that underlie all great religions. We're not saying it's fine to go out and go away for a while and get drunk or steal money or hurt people. We're saying you have to have courage, you have to think positively, you have to see God in everything, serve God in each other. Those things that every true religion would say. You live like that, and then listen, and listen carefully, because again, as Master said, there are as many spiritual paths as there are beings, human beings, as there are souls. Now, we've all been drawn to this particular path, and we're living in terms of these teachings. But why do we meditate? I mean, we meditate so that we can go deep enough to hear as clearly as we can, or to know what teacher to seek out if we need to. A very good thing to do, to test our own intuition. But we have to pay attention. We have to listen. This is what Krishna is saying to Arjuna. Better to die. Those are strong words. So within this sincerely seeking and all of the good and real and deep that is a spiritual path, make sure that we spend time each day to talk to God and say, show me the way. Show me my way, the quickest way for me to come back to you. I'll end now by reading this piece that this woman found when she prayed and said to Master, can you help me? Am I being a bad devotee? What should I do? There is no stereotyped way of promoting spiritual growth. There is no spiritual mill that can turn a non-spiritual person into self-realized souls by turning of a motor. Everyone has to work out his own salvation according to hints from his inner self after he has started on the right road by standardized spiritual advice. Be reverent, be content, be self-controlled, meditate, and then Master says, etc. he himself only knows what etc. means after all that. This is a beautiful phrase in here. He says, the crowd of tendencies that one is born with then needs slightly different handling in different people. Some inclinations need to be curbed, others tolerated, others fed sparingly, and some need to be starved out. It's very beautiful. Here's Master saying, you're all you need. Start on the road, get a good start, keep your spiritual friends close, find your teachers, and then seek God within. God bless you.
This song in context with the talk that we've just heard from Shanti, because this too is one of those songs that was composed right after Swamiji was excoriated by a 10 or 12 year member of Ananda village who just sat down with Swami for an hour and poured out all the things that Swami was doing wrong, that he was on the wrong path, he was following the wrong teacher, he was teaching in the wrong way, he was a false prophet, all kinds of horrible things that Swami just listened to. And at the end of the hour, the man left, never to return to Ananda. Swamiji walked over to his piano, and this is the song that he composed on the spot right then. Though green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempest, through storm, through turbulent tide, the touch of your hand is my strength and my guide. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. I ask for no riches that death can destroy. I crave only thee, your love and your joy. The dancers will pass, the singing must end. I welcome